Got a lot of background noise. Do you want me to turn the gain down?
Sure. I'm not hearing too much through the mic, actually. We're live.
Are we?
Yes, we are.
Okay, and you have audio?
Yes, I have audio.
All right, then we're live again.
Yes, we are live again.
Wow. Okay, cool. Hello, and welcome to Midweek Mochas at the Owlery. Second attempt this week. We had some technical difficulties yesterday. Mm-hmm. As we mentioned last week, maybe it was 2 weeks ago, good books are a core aspect of how we homeschool. However, it's not the only tool in our tool chest. Besides well-loved novels and picture books and plays and good books and great books and all the other texts that we work with, we have nearly as many games. Yep. At some point, we need to do like a panning shot of just some of the games because they're scattered all over the house.
I can do that as a reel, you know.
You can?
Yeah. I can do quick things. It's less than a minute to show everything, but you get a sense of the scope. Yeah, that could be like one of those little shorts.
Oh, wow. I didn't know we could do that.
Yeah.
We have the technology.
We have the technology.
Anyway, if you are wondering how to incorporate games, card games, board games, role-playing games, video games into your home education adventure, or why you would even want to do that, this is the show for you. Laura?
All right, so there's lots of reasons that you would want to bring games in, but they probably strike you at the first as like, wait a minute, isn't that like a special treat if things went like really well? Because you probably don't remember playing a whole lot of games in your school experience. But games can be incredibly useful for learning. Yes. And one of the many reasons is that they make information sticky. Gamification is one of those words that we frequently hear where you take an activity that isn't strictly speaking a game and you add a game element to it. And the reason that gamification works as a reward tool is that, we've still got audio.
Okay. I'm paranoid now.
Just a little bit of a quick aside. We figured out that our audio cable was off, and the YouTube software, if you lose the audio, you can't get it back. So we're using some new streaming software today. But I have done test runs with this. It's all good. Anyways.
Okay, good.
Gamification works. It works because of neurochemistry. We've got chemicals in our brain that get released as a kind of reward, go you, this is a good thing, do more of it, when we experience things like a win. And so when you're playing your Duolingo app, and after the owls come and annoyed you and tells you, okay, you got 20 in a row right, yay you, there's that sense of, that's great, I want to get more lingots. The little gem things.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to get more points. This is exciting. And so you've now made a game out of learning Latin or Spanish or Elvish, whatever language you...
Do they have Elvish?
I don't know. I do know that they've got Klingon.
Okay.
Yeah.
What will they think of next? The long and short on gamification is some very, very intelligent people, probably wearing white lab coats, have done lots and lots of research over the last, 70, 80 years, something like that, about how the body creates positive or negative feedback loops associated with winning or losing. I know Jordan Peterson talks about some of this in his books and lectures. I know just about every app that you interact with has this kind of design consideration taken to the back end, whether you're talking about something like Candy Crush Saga, you want to go back before the app era and talk about Tetris for the NES. Tetris, the shape moving, the way the lines cleared, that was a successful element that with the music and everything that provided positive feedback that made you want to keep playing. That's why video games like Civilization, Sid Meier's Civilization series are so addictive. Just one more turn. Just one more turn. And the next thing you know, it's 5 a.m. and you've actually got to get a shower and go to work instead of going to bed when you should have done because you were just going to play one more turn. So This can be used, obviously, for entertainment purposes, and that's a lot of what drives the app feedback loop that makes phones so addicting and can make video games so addicting. It's also what makes things like athletics so enjoyable for so many people. If I go out and I compete in a sparring event in Taekwondo and I win, that creates a positive, it actually creates a whole flood of positive hormones.
You don't even necessarily need to win. You just need to get in a hit. Just getting that touch, something, the point can be enough.
And then knowing that the training I do day in and day out is what helps build up to being able to do that, helps create that feedback loop to where even when I don't feel like going to Taekwondo, I'm going to make myself dress out, get on the floor, put in my best effort, because there will be a payoff. Games work that way because of how we work in terms of our neurochemistry, the hormonal triggers that then rebalance the way the whole body functions. You, as a parent, as a home educator, as a grandparent, as whatever, you can take advantage of this whole system that the human person has, and you can leverage it to benefit your home education adventure.
Exactly. Because, and mentioning game apps like Duolingo, that's one way you supplement whatever language program you're using with that. It's not necessarily the 100% best way to learn the language, but you are going to have, with most of the languages they have, really good vocabulary building, a way to reinforce and have lots of repetition on the vocabulary, and frequently some really good language patterns. They are pretty responsive about getting them ever more correct.
Yes.
And so you're going to have a lot of gradual buildup, and it'll reward the study as opposed to it being one more book they have to drag out. And so in addition to your books, you've got a game that reinforces that. You've got an app that gamifies learning, training the ear for music.
Yes, Theta Music Trainer. I got a subscription to it through a program that I'm involved with through our church. And it has, I think, 35 or 36 different mini games within the app. The UI is terrible. It was definitely not designed as a commercial product. But each of the games has an activity related to either pitch matching or ear training, so that I can play the games with the app and it provides feedback visually, graphically, that helps me produce sound more accurately and match the pitch more accurately. I don't naturally have perfect pitch, but it is improving, and my ability to match pitch of other singers around me in a choral setting is improving as I play through this game.
And in fact, that's one of the ones I'm going to be working with my children, because I have one or two kids who actually have really good pitch.
And others who don't.
And others who don't. And it's a gift. But anyone can sing.
Perfect relative pitch is a gift.
Yeah.
Perfect absolute pitch is a gift. Perfect relative pitch can be trained. And before we end up in a digression on music, the thing about relative pitch, the reason it can be trained is because it's fundamentally a skill.
Yeah.
Skills can be trained. So martial arts, running, swimming, athletic activities tend to be skill-based.
And so even if you don't have perfect pitch, you can train anyone to have better pitch.
Relative
pitch, and be able to sing, at least in a group setting.
Competently.
And
confidently.
And confidently. And so one of the things that, since music actually is a pretty important part of schooling, that's another episode. I may do an interview with my aunt about that.
You should.
Yeah, she's a early childhood.
Not just your aunt, we've got our neighbor, we've got a couple of other people we know. We've got a lot of people we know.
I know lots of music teachers. And most of them have been involved in early childhood education as well.
And one of the mothers at Taekwondo is a music therapist.
So yes, we'll do a music episode. Anyways,
or several.
Yes. So another way that games make information sticky, because of that reward system, is it makes a game covering territory regarding information. It covers more in a short period of time than you're going to get in a book or a lecture, and in a way that is generally more likely to be retained.
Yes.
And speaking of video games, I had one of my children one day, we got ourselves this giant globe, like 3 feet big, inflatable.
We don't have room for a
We don't have room
non-collapsible.
Yeah, but it was really cool. And my kids are looking over it and trying to find, where's the United States and here's Europe, and looking at all the different countries. And then they're looking at the Caribbean. And one of them says, wait a minute, there's an island missing. And I said, what island? And they mentioned, I think it was Curacao. And I'm looking at the map, and sure enough,
Curacao was missing from the map.
Not labeled. And I go to...
Well, the island wasn't even on the...
No, it wasn't there.
It wasn't in the graphic that was printed on the vinyl.
And I go to one of my other atlases and confirm, yes, it ought to be there, so it's missing. And then I asked my child, well, how did you know that? They had been playing Sid Meier's Pirates. In Sid Meier's Pirates, you sail your little ship around the Caribbean to various islands doing piratey things. And they had become so familiar with the map of the Caribbean, they knew it like the back of their hand.
Yeah. Just from playing a video game.
Just from playing a video game.
And again, it's not like we recommended they play Sid Meier's Pirates as part of their schooling. They discovered the game, they downloaded, I think, from GOG or something like that, good old games. And they enjoyed playing it because it was a well-designed game.
If I had assigned memorize a map of the Caribbean and learn to draw it from memory...
Well, you've tried doing that.
Yes, I have.
You've tried doing that, and they have not learned from that experience.
No.
But a lot of the games that I play, like I had the benefit, the wonderful experience. I went for a couple of years. I went to an experimental school in Philadelphia, and we studied all kinds of interesting stuff. But one of the things we had was a copy of Avalon Hill's Civilization board game, and this was right before Sid Meier's first Civilization video game came out. Anyway, in the back of one of the classrooms, we set up a table, and there were, 6 or 8 of us who played through a game. Now, if you are familiar with Avalon Hill Civilization, the board is huge. Yes. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of little cardboard chits. There's a lot of moving parts, and there's a rule book that is very, very opaque. And the game's been out of print now for almost 40 years.
Short story. This is not, if you're unfamiliar with board games, one that you want to start with.
No, unless you have somebody who can introduce you to the game,
yeah,
which is what I've been doing to the kids over the last 10 years.
If you have a friend and they are offering, take it up.
Yeah. Anyway, a bunch of us from school learned to play, and we would just leave it set up in the back of the classroom, and every day we'd go over after school, and for about 45 minutes we'd play through another turn, and then maybe on Fridays we'd stay for an extra couple of hours and play. And it took a month, but we would get through a game, and then we'd start a new one, or we'd take a break for a couple of weeks, and then we'd start a new one. And over the course of a couple of years, we played through probably a dozen games, which doesn't sound like much until you realize kind of how big and complex the game is. Anyway, that gave me, along with other stuff we were studying, a very, very good grasp of Mediterranean geography and cultural progression. It also sparked an interest, along with some other things I studied, in Latin and Roman history, and that just kind of carried through even to now.
Yes. And that's the thing. The game gave you, there was lots of stuff going on. The importance of trade goods and just how much that drives the movement of peoples, the interaction of cultures.
Yes.
There's lots of elements of the game where you start getting a grasp for what's happening, and even though it doesn't perfectly imitate what occurred, it starts giving a sense of what are the drivers of what happened in a history.
Yes.
In a way that you were unlikely to even, if someone had, again, in a lecture or in a book talked about it, right over the head. Not likely to pay attention. And so it makes that information sticky because it becomes important, and then it becomes interesting.
Yes.
Similarly, you're currently working your way through another Avalon Hill game,
long out of print, called
Story
Republic
of Our
of
Lives.
Rome.
Story of Our Lives. When we show you that board game collection, there's a strong mix of only just published and long out of print. But some of the long out of print ones, they're still worth hunting down, or perhaps retooling and making our own version of.
We'll see. There's also video game versions of these. Like, I know a lot of these games have been converted to either play by email or play through a web browser, or through stuff like Tabletop Simulator that's available through Steam, Roll20, which is an online game playing platform.
When I go back and do the edit to the show notes, if you can give me some links, because if you find that for what...
If I can find links to those, I would. I know what they are, and I've read in forums that these things exist, but I haven't played any. And I've seen the session reports and the videos on YouTube.
Yes. So maybe I can get a link to a video from YouTube.
Oh, that I can definitely do.
Because one of the games he's playing is a simulation of Republican Rome's politics.
Yes.
So it is not as boring as that sounds. It's actually fascinating because
it's very exciting.
Because not unlike doing a model UN or any of those
mock trial, moot court, model U.S. Congress, and those were all things that I did in middle school and high school as participatory things where we'd get together in a gymnasium, 200 students, everybody's assigned a character, whether it's, Chuck Grassley from Nebraska or, who was the UN Secretary General when we were younger? Kofi Annan. Kofi Annan.
Blast from the past.
And we'd have objectives, and we would have to negotiate with other students playing their roles in these big simulations, and there would be a few administrators, usually teachers, sometimes older high school students or college students, who would help administer them. And that was a huge part of life in the public high school I went to. Mock trial and moot court I did in high school. I also did when I was in law school, so that was part of professional education. I had simulations that I had to play through when I did my MBA work in business school, and also when I was doing my master's in economics.
Yeah.
So simulations are definitely part of how education can be done. This was a simulation of Roman political life.
And it starts
It starts right on the eve of the outbreak of the First Punic War in the mid 3rd century BC.
And runs up through the assassination
of Caesar in 44 BC.
Yeah. And as a result, playing this game, you're going to end up with a very in-depth knowledge, not just of some of the major players in Roman politics, but a much better sense of all of the different political bodies and the tensions that exist among each player. Because with every actor, there's a tension between the desire to acquire personal status.
Yes.
But also the recognition that will get undermined if you're seen to be too self-serving.
Right.
And so there's a balance. And then there's a huge player interaction portion as well.
But there's also a cooperative element, because the players have to collaborate in order to make sure Rome doesn't collapse and get overrun, either from internal strife or external warfare. Rome, it's very easy for contemporary people to sit here and say, oh, Rome was an aggressive imperialistic power. Well, okay, yes, maybe. But more importantly, Rome grew up in a really rough neighborhood. Rome did what it had to do to survive, and that frequently involved violence and the threat of violence in order to make sure it had the breathing space it needed for its people to grow and thrive. And you can read about that in books, and there are some very, very good books that cover that material. Most of them are not for children. But when you experience some of that, particularly since the brain does not differentiate between fictional experience and real experience.
Yeah.
If you can trigger those experiences neurochemically, it's as if you lived that experience. Simulation games make that possible, where the cost is some cardboard chits and some time, and hopefully everybody gets along. As it is, 4 of the kids asked me yesterday to finish the solitaire game I've been playing through for the last couple of days, reacquainting myself with the rules, and start running a game of Republic of Rome with them today.
Yeah.
So
wow.
We'll start seeing how many assassinations there are in the Senate.
We'll see how quickly the children learn that it cannot be winner take all.
Rome can collapse 5 or 6 times, and then you just reset up the pieces, and that's one of the great virtues of games, which is why they're used for training in business, in professional education. You have simulations in med school. I have friends that have gone through, and where simulation gaming started, war colleges and the training of military officers, because originally lead figures and now, figures of any you can get lead-free miniatures now, but even just with cardboard and paper hex and chip war games, wargaming starts in the 19th or really the 18th century as a way of helping to train a professional officer corps on how to not waste peasant lives in the Napoleonic tactics of that era.
Because you had such a change in how war was being fought. It had moved away from
an individual warrior ethos to a more collective army conflict soldier ethos. That's a discussion for another time.
But the games were the game. Well, the fact is, with a warrior ethos, you've basically got man versus man, and it's the training spent in the courtyard, working on your skills until such time as you get called up to duty.
Yeah.
Once you end up with armies, now you're
strategy, tactics, and logistics,
which is a very different world, and games are actually really good for teaching those skills.
Yes.
Which is a fantastic transition to one of the other reasons, which is that games are good for skill building. And as you were pointing out about that low cost, that allows for iterative learning.
Skills, so knowledge can be conveyed through a lecture, not necessarily effectively, but it can be conveyed through a lecture. It can be conveyed through a text. It can be communicated in a discussion. Skills have to be practiced.
Yes.
You want to get good at strategic decision making, you have to do lots of strategic decision making. You want to get good at tactical adaptation, you have to do lots of tactical adaptation. You want to get good at swimming, you have to swim. Now, you might need a stroke coach to help you improve how you cup your hand as you go into the water, how many strokes you can make before you have to turn and breathe. But those are all skill elements, and they get better with practice. Singing, walking, running, jumping, martial arts, baseball, all of these things have skill components. And education is no different.
And they're based in repetition, and games create a reward system for repetition.
And allow frequent, high-volume repetition.
Yes.
I know I've been reading up on weightlifting, and there's kind of this tension in the weightlifting community of high volume of repetitions at low weights versus low volume of repetition at high weights. What's the best way to build muscle, and so on and so forth. And while I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, it's a point worth bringing up, in that, how do you master a skill? Well, strictly speaking, the way the human person works, high volume of repetitions, doing something well, is how you develop skills. I think it was Malcolm Gladwell came out with, was he the one with the 10,000 hours idea a few years ago?
I don't recall. I just remember that I ran across it.
It's become a trope in popular culture that you need 600 hours of repeating something in order to acquire basic facility with that skill set, and then at least 10,000 hours to master it. And so you can look at, violinists who start at 3 years old with Suzuki method. By the time they're 12 or 15, they've put in that 10,000 hours of training.
Yeah.
And the same goes for, I've built models, financial models in Excel for 20 years. As part of my job. When I started, I was terrible, and I looked everything up constantly, and I got it wrong most of the time. Over the decades that I have done this, I've gotten really good. I can help troubleshoot other people's models. It gave me a facility with creating programs. All of that's to say, games afford you the opportunity to do that in a relatively low-cost package.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things about iterative learning is that you're also training your children to learn to take a calculated risk. And because it's so low cost, you can help them start learning to deal with failure,
mm-hmm.
and learn to see failure not as disaster, but as a step in learning.
Yes. Because to iterate through something, and I hear people use the word iterative or to iterate all the time at work. It means to repeat a process step by step, making minor tweaks in order to improve the process. And so that means, by definition, you don't get it right the first time, you don't get it right the second time, you don't get it right the third time. You may have to go through dozens or hundreds of repetitions in order to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. And so games afford the opportunity to do that kind of iterative learning. Oh, that strategy or that decision didn't work well. Oh, hey, I got a great card, but I didn't quite capitalize on it the way I should have. This becomes possible, and then you can learn to take calculated risks because the cost of failure is low. And as you become more comfortable evaluating and taking risks, that's when it becomes really, really effective as a training tool.
And that's what allows you to build up things like an ability with strategic thinking and analysis.
Yes.
Because to learn from an iterative process, you have to start saying, okay, why didn't that work?
Right.
And you start seeing relationships between the actions that you take and the results that you get.
Why didn't it work, or how do I make it work better?
Exactly.
And they're really, in some ways, the same question. And so strategic considerations are, what are the end goals? What are we trying to achieve? What are the objectives? The tactical component of that is, how do I get there? So if I decide I want to, bench press 200 pounds, I figure out, where am I today? I figure out what's a reasonable amount of time to get to benching 200. And then I work backwards and I figure out a program tactically to iterate through. Okay, this week I plateaued, so we're going to keep doing that, or we're going to back off the reps and increase the weight or something. We're going to play with it. I might have a coach who advises me on this, but I'm going to iterate through. I do the same thing at work. We try and train the kids to do the same thing.
Yeah, and games are part of how we're training them on that. And another thing that we're teaching, another skill that's a really valuable one, is emotional regulation.
And that's a hard one to figure out how to teach. Games provide the opportunity.
Because it gives you plenty of opportunities where they're in a situation where things aren't going their way.
Yes. Which, as I'm sure you know, frequently happens in life. I know it happens to me a lot.
So one of the ones I was thinking about, so I was out of town a few weeks ago.
Yes.
And while I was out, you were like, all right, fantastic. How am I occupying everyone? We're going to play a game.
We spent the weekend playing a board game called Dominant Species. Each of the players takes the role of a species. So you've got like reptiles and birds and mammals. And it's essentially, sorry, language just.
It's a strategy game. Your task, very complex strategy game, but not completely inaccessible. Our 10-year-old can play it with proper.
Our 8-year-old can play it.
Yeah,
and he was still 7 at the time.
So you need an older person who understands the rules to guide the thing, but younger players can.
And we missed certain rules.
Yeah.
Like, we went through like a whole round of the game, and it was like, oh, we misapplied that. Okay, well, let's change it next round rather than go back and try and redo everything.
And anyways, the strategic objective of the game, the strategic aspect is
the victory condition.
The victory condition is to become the dominant species as an encroaching ice age reduces the amount of land available. The tactical aspects are all of the different ways that you can get victory points to reach that objective.
Yes.
And the emotional regulation aspect is that the game has a lot of reverses.
Sudden reversals.
Sudden reversals. You can look like everything's on top, and then all of a sudden it's just cut out from under you.
Yeah.
And conversely, you can look like you are like one move away from losing, and then everything comes your way and you're on top.
And we had that happen. Mm-hmm. And one of our children was behind at one point of the game, had a bit of a meltdown because he thought he was doomed and he should just give up. He ended up basically coming out and winning the game when we finally had to pack it up. We didn't. It's as I said, it's a fairly long and complex playing game, especially with small people who, sometimes keeping everybody focused is a little difficult. And of course, when you're playing a game over 3 days, you got to stop and food and
dinner, yeah,
dinner and the normal things of running household. But that experience was very instructive for him, and he's at a crucial age where learning those kinds of things. Another game we play with them that frequently has a baleful outlook is Castle Panic.
Oh, and that's a great one because
And that's
it's
a great one for
cooperative.
young kids. It's a cooperative game. There is almost no text involved, so even pre-literate children or special needs children who are struggling to learn to read can play Castle Panic. It's widely available.
Yes.
I think we got the base set, I thought, as like a party gift or something for one of the
widely
kids.
available and very affordable.
But basically, it's a tower defense game, and I know tower defense games had a bit of popularity as apps. This is cardboard pieces, which we have a strong preference for cardboard pieces. We know some people who don't want the clutter. They don't have the space. They much prefer to play things on a tablet.
This one's got a nice
This one's got a nice tactile feel. The pieces play. The rules are fairly simple. But you start off trying to defend against an onslaught of enemies against the tower. And
you have to work together with all of the other players to defend the tower to the best of your ability, and you're doomed.
even if you do so, you're still likely to lose. The game is stacked against the players, which helps create a sense of how do we work together. And sometimes you'll get somebody who doesn't want to, and everybody gets kind of a little cross. But that's also a learning experience because people don't always get along together, and learning how to get along with each other is a critical aspect of becoming a mature and functional adult.
Mm-hmm. And I think that brings us to another thing that games do, and that's building bonds.
Yes, which is why we started playing so many games with the kids.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's the obvious ones we've talked about. They build bonds with information. You, with your love of ancient history, especially Rome.
And the Romans. Of the Republican period specifically.
And while there were books that did that, the games were part of what awakened that love for that period.
Yes. I was willing to read the doorstopper-sized novels because I was already interested in the subject, and I was already interested in the subject because I was exposed through board games and through some very creative academic practices, experimental academic practices. It created and inflamed a love for this and a passionate interest in the subject.
Yes. But there's also the bonds with the other players.
Yes.
And so that can be among various siblings playing a game together, with the friends that you were playing with. And so, if you've got a number of children and one of the things you're trying to do is build up that sibling relationship,
Yes.
games can be part of what can do that, especially if you're doing cooperative games. Because the advantage of a game like Castle Panic is that in forcing everyone, rather than being in an adversarial situation, to have to work together, they start to see and help each other, and it helps build up that sense of working together with each other.
Yes, cooperative games can definitely help stimulate that. I would also point out that the adversarial relationship in some competitive games can be beneficial because it can create a positive outlet for underlying tensions that may already exist.
Yes.
Competitive games don't create rivalry and discord among people, but they do provide a way to constructively work through it so that it doesn't explode in a more costly and kinetic meltdown.
Yeah.
Which can end friendships. Now, there are games that can end friendships.
Yes. Diplomacy's famous for that.
Infamous, yeah. But diplomacy is a lot of fun with the right group of people. And I have played off and on an email administered game of diplomacy with some of my friends from a D&D board that I'm on for, I don't know, almost 20 years now. Almost as long as we've been homeschooling.
But I think that the key one for a lot of our audience would be that there's that bond between parent and child that can come from playing games together.
Yes. We heard a sermon many years ago, and the preacher asserted that you could probably stay home and do nothing but play checkers with your child from basically the age of 5 to the age of 18. And the relationship you would develop with that child would be far superior to what a lot of other people have with their own children. Because you just spent time with them and you got to know each other and you had a shared interest. One of the great things, one of the things that stimulated me to start running AD&D games for my son and his friends was that they were interested in playing. I knew how to play, and it was a way of everybody getting to spend some time together.
Yeah.
That has grown into, we're having a game day here at the house day after tomorrow.
We're packing 20 people in here.
Yeah, 20 more people in here.
Yes.
And yeah, I'm going to be running a game with probably 20 people around the table.
Yeah.
And that's been going on for several years. Yeah. The core of that group started over a decade ago.
But it's become the thing it's been several years that you've been going to a gaming convention where you're bringing some of the kids along.
Yes.
And
other guys come to the convention and bring their families, spouses, children.
It's very much become a multi-generational thing. It started as a convention for people who loved sort of the earliest editions of Dungeons and Dragons, but at this point you've got people they're there. It's not just, the people who are playing in the 70s and, that wave of the early 80s. You've now got people there who've got their children and their grandchildren there as well.
Yes.
And it's this multi-generational thing with a bond built by playing games together.
And by no means is everyone on the same page politically or socially. By no means is everybody on the same page in terms of religion or economic outlook or whatever. But we have this thing in common. And so we can set aside our differences and we can hang out for a weekend and enjoy ourselves. And that's just part of it.
And so there's the bond among each other from having the common love for this game. And then, again, with those generations, you can see that you've got these good family relationships built through playing together.
Yes.
Where, the son doesn't think it's just, that's dad's thing. It's their thing.
And that can happen, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. I have a couple of colleagues who, as their kids got to be older teenagers, they concluded it just wasn't their thing, and they moved on in a different direction. But the bond established when they were younger because of the time spent playing together is still there and helps keep them close, even though they're now separated by distance, by interests, and all the vicissitudes of being an adult and then trying to maintain those friendships. Several of the folks coming over Saturday are friends of mine from college. Others are people I've met since college. Several of them bring their kids to contribute to the general pool. We'll I think we're going to do brats and hot dogs and just everybody's just going to hang out. We're going to play the game. We're going to play AD&D basically, but we have at times done board games. Our kids discovered Kill Dr. Lucky and Save Dr. Lucky because one of my friends, his kids love the game, so he brought it over one day when I wasn't up to running a role-playing game.
Yeah.
And we've run Circus Maximus, which is chariot racing.
Oh, that's
more like Ben-Hur. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun.
That's a fantastic game.
But all of these are opportunities to create interaction with people. And then as our older children are going out in the world, they're finding other people who have played these games or similar games or are intrigued by what we're doing. And as they interact with it, there are points of contact from which they can get to know each other. One of the guys who grew up in our group has since moved on. He's starting college this fall. Well, he met a young woman at a gaming convention, and she's in the industry as well as enjoys playing the games. He enjoys playing the games. They're dating, and I've got colleagues at work who are like, I don't know what I'm going to do. My kids, they want to date, but I can't find anybody, and they can't find anybody, and they're very worried about kids and dating. Well, common interests can be a starting point there. And so while this isn't a solution to that, and it's certainly not going to prevent problems, I know plenty of families who they played games with their kids and, the kids decided to make radically different decisions. But if you're looking to stack the deck in your favor, building those relationships with your kids when they're younger, games provide an opportunity to do that.
Yes. So how do you get started?
That's a really good question.
Yeah. An easy way might be doing something like joining a local chess club together. Chess is a fantastic game for building those skills like strategic thinking, analysis, emotional regulation. Is there a whole body of knowledge that you can gain from that, like some of those big board games? Not as much, but there's a lot of those other elements of the personal bonds and the skill building. And at the chess club, if you're not already really good at chess and happen to have your own board, that's a way that you can learn alongside your child.
Yes, and that's key. You don't have to know the game in order to play the game with your kid.
Yeah.
Because you as an adult have a whole world of experience that you can use for reading through the rules, learning to follow the procedures, and helping invite the child. And then the two of you go together learning the game, learning how to play the game better. And sometimes they're going to best you, and sometimes you're going to best them. And that works really well. So if you don't know chess, or you don't know a board game that, you buy for whatever reason, that's fine. That's fine. You don't have to be the expert.
And I suggest chess club because especially if you have a smaller family, you've got this great ready-made social circle that you can just get plugged into. And frequently there's other homeschooling families there as well. But you're going to find other people and a whole world of them if you're joining with other chess players.
And once you have a handle on how to play, there are online options as well where you can play with other people. There's tons of online support to complement that. But I'd really urge you, start local and start in person, because it's a game that plays best when you can interact with your opponent. And you will learn more sitting across the table from someone and playing 3 games in a row, even if you lose all 3. Because a good player, if they're consistently beating you, will start saying, hey, this is what I'm doing. Try doing this.
And I've watched that happen. We ended up at an impromptu luncheon one Sunday, and while we were there,
I love the idea that we have impromptu luncheons.
Well, it was. Most of the time we have...
It's so very Wind in the Willows.
But I mean, most of the time there's a 2 to 3 month lead time. It's well, let's check our schedules. This one happened.
Yeah, that's true.
This one just happened to fall together. Anyways, we're over there, and our host ended up pulling out a chessboard and played rounds of chess with several of our children. And again, there was that great opportunity of pass the time. It allows you to, interact with someone beyond someone in your age cohort.
Right.
And he was giving them some tips on things they were doing well or poorly, even as they played. I think one of our children was I can't believe he got me with Scholar's Mate. I should have seen that. But it happens. And there was that recognition of she saw that she had been caught in a very easy trap in the aftermath. And could see, it's okay, that's what I needed to pay attention to.
And that was itself a victory, because I can remember just a few years ago, that particular child of ours would have been in a total meltdown, having lost the game and, been upset about it. But with age, in this case, has come a bit of maturity and a bit of self-reflection. Mm-hmm. And again, the game acted as a trigger, but also a stimulus for that.
And the years of playing in our chess club was part of what helped develop that.
Yes. And so, our local library has a chess club. That's the one our kids got involved with because it's scholastic. It's K through high school graduation, basically. But the moderators of the club are members of the community who are in the adult chess club for our city.
Yes.
And they sponsor the library. So there's that children's community that they can get to know each other, and one of our kids got to know some of the other kids, and one of them's now going to college, and they were messaging each other through, I think it was Discord or something like that.
Just the other day, reconnected. It's oh, hey, remember so-and-so from chess club? Yeah, I just found out he's got into college, one that we happen to think very highly of.
Yeah.
And was telling about what he was planning to study, and they both, like our son, he's got ambitions to write novels as well. So there was a neat aspect of a friendship formed over the chessboard.
Right.
That was then getting continued on, and they're catching up, and it was really neat to have that happen. So, chess clubs, great way to get started if you don't know what else to play. If you happen to have board games already in your house, though, just set aside one day a week as a game day, whether it's in the evening as a game night, maybe just have a day that works well for you to say, rather than trying to do bookwork today, this is the day that we're going to do something different. We're going to play games. If the weather's nice, we're going to go out to a park or get to the zoo or something like that.
Saturday afternoons when everybody's tired after sports practice or whatever in the morning may not be the best time to introduce a new game because everybody's tired. But if you've got a game that you're familiar with, you can definitely play those on things like Saturday afternoons.
Yeah, but picking a day as a game day and
schedule it. Schedule a block of time.
Yeah, it's
dedicated.
It's the dedicated time, the setting something aside that's what you're going to plan to do.
I know a lot of marriage experts recommend date nights. Treat a game day with the family, especially with the kids, very, very similarly. If you're in a separated or shared custody situation, figure out how to make it part of the time you spend with your child so that y'all can just relax and play that game. And it can be as simple as you're going to teach them how to play poker. You're going to teach them how to play blackjack. You're going to teach them how to play bridge if you know how to play bridge.
But if you're deciding to play one of those sort of bigger board games, one of those the long playing ones like the ones you were talking about, like Civilization, some of those old Avalon Hill bookcase games,
some of the newer games that try and fill a similar niche.
Yeah, if you're playing one of those, there is a solution if your time is limited, and that's not unlike what you did at your school.
Right. Because leave it set up in a place, and since everybody's got cell phones, and every cell phone has a camera now, even the smaller feature phones.
If you don't have the space to have a place set up, or if you've got smaller children where even if you left it set up, it's not likely to stay that way. Believe me, we remember.
Oh, yeah.
You can take a photo on your phone of what the setup of the board was. You can take a few light notes. This is who had what. Give everyone a card to privately write down what their hand was, so if in case something gets shuffled, they still find everything that they had.
Right.
Do what you can, and then if you pack it away, you can reset the game to where you were at.
You've got a way to return to your save state, if you will.
Yeah, and so there is basically a way to save a game with one of those longer board games, because there are some of the ones we play that are like you can play it in half an hour, 1 hour. That's reasonable. Unless you happen to have a long weekend, like, you got a beach vacation and it's a rainy day at the beach. That's actually a good day to play a game like that if you happen to bring it along. But if you don't have vast blocks of time to just leave something set up and play through the course of a weekend, then you take advantage of the technology we have now and create a saved game if you want to tackle one of those larger games.
Yeah.
But either way, just set that time aside. And that way you've dedicated it and you've just decided that this is something that's important to try. And I think let's make a point in a future episode, or maybe just put together a reel or something, of showing some of the games we're using within our homeschool life.
Yeah, absolutely. Because to get started, pick a game, learn to play it, get good at it to where everybody's enjoying it and you're not having to stop and think through the rules.
It's just about any game. I think Monopoly has got things to teach.
Yeah. Monopoly, Candyland, Chutes and Ladders. I mean, tic-tac-toe.
Even the simplest, most popular games have got something going on for them.
Foursquare?
Yeah. But
does anybody play Foursquare anymore?
I have no idea.
Okay, I'm not sure I remember how to play Foursquare.
Yes.
Anyway, but that's a place to start. We're going to do another episode or a series on how to intentionally pick games based on your homeschooling goals and then how to develop those. So if you have specific questions around that, please send them to us. I think that pretty much wraps it up for this week. Games, whether we're talking board games, card games, role-playing games, video games, gamified apps, these not only make information sticky, they can help build skills while cultivating bonds.
Yes.
So we hope you've seen games in a new light, and you will give a try to adding games into your home education adventure. If you have any questions, please leave a message in the comments or contact us by email or through social media. Links to everything are going to be in the show notes. Let us know what you'd like to hear about next. Please share this with your friends, share this with your enemies, share this with people you don't even know. And until